Welcome in, everyone. Pleasure to be with you this morning. Sorry that we're a little bit late. I had a snafu with the printing up here. Well, I tell you what, we just did a systems update here at the station, and everything has gone haywire. The printers aren't communicating with the computers. We had an issue with that on the radio show this morning, but luckily I finally have my notes, and goodness knows I can do a show without notes, but I'd prefer not to. I'm sure you would prefer that I not do that. I can spitball for an hour with the best of them, but it's much, much better if I have my information right here in front of me and I don't have to fumble around on the internet trying to find all of my sources on the fly. Because, of course, this is a very information-based, very facts-heavy show, and because of that, we want to bring you the most accurate information, especially when we're dealing with this story. As I'm sure everybody here knows, there has been a shooting at the Galleria Mall the other night, and we covered that story yesterday. This was on Thanksgiving, so this has been about 5, I guess. Yeah, it would be about 5 days ago now that it is Tuesday. And we have been covering all the latest details, all the latest news. But because this is a ongoing investigation, we're getting this sort of slow trickle of information. And I just wanted to, before we address anything else, go ahead and give you some updates on this pressing local story, because unfortunately it seems like every time Alabama is in the national news, it's because something bad has happened, and unfortunately this is no exception. So we have seen updates from CNN, from the Associated Press, from the Washington Post. I've read articles that have come out about this particular shooting just in the past few days from a lot of big name national news outlets. And so since this is happening in our backyard, it's really important that we understand exactly what is going on. We understand the details of the story. So right now, I want to start us off with something positive, because there are a lot of people that are really upset about this. There's a lot of contention out there. There's a lot of hurt feelings, and I understand those to a degree. But one thing that everybody ought to be able to agree on, and it gives me great pleasure to give this news to you, the 12-year-old girl who was an innocent bystander, not involved in the incident at all, not a part of the spat that apparently took place over a pair of tennis shoes at the mall. She was shot, but she's okay. She has been discharged from the hospital. It looks as though she's going to be perfectly okay, because according to her CT scan, and goodness knows I'd hate to be a 12-year-old having to go through that thing, because it's a big enough pain being an adult, and I've had quite a few CT scans, as you can imagine, being a cancer patient. So looking through her CT scan, they said that based on their evidence, the bullet did fracture a rib, but it didn't touch the spine. And their most recent report was the bullet is basically where it's going to stay, and it's not going anywhere, and it shouldn't cause any problems. Which is a little strange to think about, that the slug from the firearm, whatever it was, I assume based on the reports that it was probably a handgun. It's weird to think about, well, it's in there now, it's not going to cause any problems. Well, why wouldn't you just take it out? Now, I'm not trying to back... I'm not trying to Monday morning quarterback or backseat drive when it comes to the medical profession, because goodness knows I have no expertise in that field. I know a little biology, and that's about it. But I don't know why you don't just go ahead and remove it. Maybe it's in a delicate place. Maybe the risk of surgery is higher than the risk of taking it out. I don't know. But it seems a little odd to me that they're leaving the bullet in there. But that's the latest, and certainly we do pray for this girl and her family. Molly is going to be okay, and she has been released from the hospital, so we are certainly pleased that prayers were answered when it came to this little girl, and that she is going to be all right, because as tragic as the events on Thursday in Birmingham were, they would be far more tragic if someone that wasn't even involved had been killed. So as rough as it is, as terrible as it is, and by the way, that still could be the case. For all we know, this guy, EJ, the evidence may come out and it may show that he wasn't involved in the initial altercation. And so that would also be a tragedy. But at least for right now, we know that Molly, the bystander, the little girl that was there, she is out of the woods, or at least that is what it seems so far. So the other updates, police officer was on duty and did have his body cam. Because I know there was some confusion. There were some reports and some witnesses saying that the police officer that ordered him to drop his gun, presumably. Again, we don't even know if that happened. But the police officer that shot EJ, according to some reports, he was an off-duty police officer. He was not in uniform. Based on the reports that we're seeing now, it appears as though that was not the case. That not only was this police officer on duty, and they were able to confirm that, so that is true, but he would have had his body cam on as well, which is also good because it means we're going to get a much better view of exactly what happened and whether or not protocol was followed and whether or not EJ just had his gun at his side or had his gun in a holster or had his gun out and was brandishing it around, and more importantly, whether or not the officer ordered him to drop his weapon or not. Because to be honest, and this is one of the things that I brought up yesterday, I'm a concealed carry permit holder. If I'm in a situation where there is a shooting going on, first thing I do is draw my weapon and I start looking for the shooter to try to take him down. Not because I think I'm Rambo or Superman or anything like that, just because that is the way to keep other people safe. And as a citizen, I will take it upon myself to do that if that is the scenario I find myself in. However, a police officer shows up, orders you to drop your weapon, you drop your weapon right then and there. Because the police officer doesn't know you, he doesn't know whether or not you're the shooter or a good guy with a gun, and so you comply immediately. However, if some random guy, even if he happens to be an off-duty police officer, if he does not identify himself, if he's just wearing civilian clothing, and he walks up to me with a gun and orders me to drop my firearm, I'm a little skeptical of that. Now, if he identifies himself, he shows a badge, something like that, then okay. Then he and I don't have a problem and I comply. But based on the initial story that this guy was just in civilian clothes, didn't warn him that he was a police officer, honestly, at that point, I kind of side with the person that has a concealed carry permit just because he doesn't know you either. But based on the latest reports, it does not seem as though that is the case. It seems as though this was an officer in full uniform with body cam, and hopefully we'll get that footage soon, which, by the way, you'll remember yesterday, we didn't even know if body cam footage existed. We were pretty sure there would be surveillance video because it's a mall. There's cameras everywhere. But as far as the body cam footage, we didn't even know if that existed or if the officer was wearing a body cam at the time. We can now confirm that that does exist, and it is in the hands of Aaliyah. So whenever Aaliyah feels that it is acceptable, it is ready, that they're going to be okay with releasing that, then they will do so post-haste. And the newest report from AL.com has mentioned that Bradford, EJ, was brandishing his firearm. That's the latest report that we're seeing. So this is different than what we were hearing initially, because they weren't very descriptive about, we knew that he had a gun, but we weren't sure about how exactly that took place. There have been rumors that it was holstered. There were rumors that he had it at his side, but he wasn't waving it around. Brandishing is very specific. To brandish something means to wave or point in a menacing way. And if this guy was brandishing his gun at an on-duty uniformed police officer, then even if he was really there trying to help, and again, we don't know if he was involved in the altercation, he was a part of the shooting, he just didn't fire those specific shots, or whether or not he was actually just an innocent bystander trying to help people out. Even if you're in the second scenario, though, even if you're just a concealed carry permit holder trying to help people out, trying to wave people away from the shooting, even if that's who you are, you defy an order from a uniformed police officer and you are brandishing your firearm around and brandishing it at him, then he absolutely is 100% within his right to take your life if he believes that you are threatening his life or the life of those around you. That's what a police officer is supposed to do in that situation. Now, I hope that wasn't the case. I don't know exactly where this is going to go because, again, none of us really know. None of us really understand what happened and went on there, and we won't know until we see video footage of it, hopefully with sound. I would assume that sound is going to be included in this. I hope that is the case. But that is the latest that we know. Hopefully we'll get some video evidence, some video footage before too long, but right now, that's all we know. We don't even know the identity of the police officer. For all we know, the police officer in question may be somebody that is a minority. They could be black themselves. They could be a woman. We just have no idea about that. And so whenever that information is released, you can believe that we will be giving commentary of it right here on Tactics. But this whole thing spurred protests last night. And there were some protests, some minor protests that were going on over the weekend. Not really a big deal, at least based on what I was seeing. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that it was a holiday weekend, probably a lot of people out of town, people worried about staying with their families, don't want to fool with this. But a much larger protest happened last night where some laws were broken. First of all, the protest started from the city, one of the city municipal buildings. I don't know if it was actually City Hall, but it was one of their municipal buildings, and it started there, continued on to Highway 31, and then eventually ended up at the Galleria. And you can go online and watch video of the protest and some of the things the protesters were saying. But here's one big issue that I have. As long as you are peacefully protesting and you're doing so on public property, even if I think you're wrong for doing so, even if I don't agree with what you're protesting, you are well within your right to do so. However, blocking a road is a crime. When you do that, you are no longer protesting, you are engaged in illegal activity. And so that is not something that is protected under your rights. For example, if I want to hire a hitman and I say, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to murder this guy, and then he goes out and does that, I can't say, well, free speech. Well, no, the free speech is protected. You engaging in the illegal activity isn't. It's not illegal to tell somebody to go kill someone. It is illegal to tell them to do so trying to engage in a conspiracy to kill someone. And so the speech isn't being prosecuted, but the action that results in someone's death absolutely is. And in this case, the protesting itself is not illegal. In fact, as much as I may disagree with a protest of this nature where there's virtually no facts out yet, which, again, I don't understand why you protest unless you know what you're protesting. Even in that scenario, though, your right to protest is protected, and I will fight for it because it is a constitutionally protected right. But that does not give you the right to, while you are engaged in protesting, to engage in illegal activity either. And here's another thing that this really bothers me, because they shut down both lanes of traffic on 31 for a long time. This is a really busy highway in Montgomery. And at one point, they're also banging on a citizen's car hood. I don't know if there were any other illegal activities that went on. I'm just going by the video that I've seen. So there was one guy banging on a random civilian's car hood, and they were stopping all these people from going to where they needed to go. This is one thing I've never understood about the road blocking thing with the protest. Do these idiots really think that this is ingratiating anybody to their cause? Do they think anybody that is caught in this traffic jam that is completely fabricated and produced because these people are angry about it, do they think these people are sitting in their cars going, you know what, I didn't agree with the protesters before, but now that they've caused me to be late, they're keeping me away from my family, now all of a sudden, yeah, I absolutely agree with what these protesters are talking about. And this is why this is just so stupid. If you're going to protest, wait until the facts come out so you know whether or not you have a legitimate reason to protest. And even once that happens, don't engage in illegal activity and don't stop people that are trying to get to or from work, that are trying to get home to see their families, trying to go out for an evening with their wife. All that does is tick people off. If anything, that's going to make people less likely to agree with your protest, not more likely. And so not only is it illegal, and they should have been arrested for it, but it also has the other effect of you're probably just going to tick people off and turn people off of your message if you engage in that when you're protesting. It looks like we have a caller on line one. Good morning, and what's your name?
John.
Okay, so John, tell me what you think about this protest that was going on in Birmingham last night about the mall shooting.
Well, obviously, it's some of the things that you've already pointed out about it being illegal and disrupting. One of the things that I think the assumption is made is that the police department wants harm to come to someone. They want to shoot someone. But I don't think it's like that at all. It's kind of like and much, much less important, I understand, but it's the same mindset. When I used to have a substitute teacher come in, the kids would always say, well, he was after me or she was after me, and they just wanted me to be in trouble and that kind of thing. The last thing that a sub teacher wants is any trouble, any problems at all. And the policemen are the same way. They don't want anything like this to happen. But the assumption seems to be made that they look for people to shoot. The last thing they want to do is shoot.
Well, and that's the thing.
They know what that's going. They know what's going to happen as a result.
No, and here's the thing about that. Whether the shooting is justified or not, we have seen several incidents in the past couple of years, especially when race is a factor, where police officers, they were acquitted. It turns out they did everything by the book. They did everything within their power to do the right thing, and that still ended their career because of the perception, because no police officer unit in the country would hire them after that. And so a police officer does not want to shoot somebody because he knows that could end his career.
Well, that's just like this is we just take one of the things I think about. Both of us say, wait to see, let's wait till the facts come out before you. That doesn't mean we don't have compassion for the young man that lost his life or his family or anything like that. The assumption is made that we don't care about his life. That nothing could be further from the truth.
No.
I hate to see anyone that young lose their life, especially in this situation. And to me, it's assumed that I don't care because of what I've just said. All I'm saying is, and all you're saying is, wait.
Well, that's true. And here's another thing. We're often encouraged by people, sometimes in the media, sometimes that are involved in these kind of protests, to think about how horrific it is for the person that was shot, in this case, E.J. Bradford. And I'm sympathetic to that argument. And I mean, I got to believe that his mom and dad, this has got to be just a nightmare for them, having lost their son. But here's the other thing. Why is it we're never encouraged to look at it from the other family's point of view, the family of this police officer? Because of this incident, even if he did absolutely everything right, there is a good chance that he's going to have to move. They're going to have to pick up roots, and he may have to find a completely different job, not even in law enforcement. That family may be facing some pretty tough times. I realize that's not the same as losing a loved one, but still, we act as though compassion should be a one-way street, and we should only feel empathy towards one side of the equation and not the other.
Mm-hmm. Well, don't you think a lot of this is because of the momentum as to why they jump on this and start protesting immediately? Because if something is found out or discovered that officers did do what they were supposed to do, then they've lost their moment. And that's why they don't wait, because they can lead the story at this point.
Well, I think that is part of it, and I think that it's very clear based on some of the things that they're doing that they have essentially already made their mind up to really no evidence is going to deter the narrative that they have already crafted in their mind. And we saw this in a protest that happened, I want to say it was in South Carolina, about a year and a half ago, that it turns out when all was said and done after the protest had taken place, it was revealed that the police officer that shot the guy was also black. And they just didn't care. They kept going forward with the narrative that it was racism. And so, again, they're really, basically they've got their mind made up about what the story is before it comes out. And even when the details come out that refute their story, they continue on with the narrative anyway. And that is really frustrating to a lot of people like myself.
Yeah, I hope we can get to the point that whoever the shooter is, or whoever the victim is, that's innocent, that the color doesn't matter. Because that's where we need to be. A life has been lost. What difference does it make the color of the person that shot him? I mean, it's still a loss of a life. And I know what people will say when I say that, but I hope our society can get to the point that we are colorblind, and that part of it doesn't matter because both are human beings.
Well, that's exactly right. And thank you so much for your call, John from Millbrook. I appreciate it. And that was really the intent behind the All Lives Matter movement, one that I was actually engaged in, because Black lives do matter, because they are human lives, and white lives matter, and Hispanic lives matter, and Asian lives matter. Why? Because all lives matter. And so that is really the intent behind that. It really, as fellow human beings, we shouldn't be worried about the color of the skin of the person whose life is lost. A life lost is a life lost. And we should all have compassion. We should all have empathy when something like that takes place. And I do empathize with Bradford. Even if it turns out that he wasn't doing the right thing, it is still a tragic event that a human life was lost, even if it was due to his own bad decisions. And again, we don't know if that's the case. It could be that the police officer was wrong, and that, it would be even more tragic if that were the case, because that meant an innocent life was lost. But nonetheless, kind of continuing on with these protests, one thing that they were doing is that they were shouting, "No justice, no peace, no racist police." Right, so there's a couple problems with that. First of all, justice involves a process. That's why we call it due process. That is part of the judicial system. That when someone is accused of a crime, you hear their side of the story, and you hear the accuser's side of the story, and then you bring out evidence that supports each side, and then you make a decision and put down a punishment based on that. That's what justice is. So ironically, this mob that is calling for quote-unquote justice has not been obstructed here. The process is going on right now. What they want is mob justice. In other words, whatever the majority of people think should happen to this guy should happen to him regardless of whether he did anything right or wrong. And that's the problem that you're running into. That these people are insistent upon, well, this guy's already guilty. We've already made our mind up. He's guilty and he should be punished. Well, that's not justice. That's not even close to justice. That's mob rule. I mean, that's just people get, and what's unfortunate about this, and I know that I'm going to get some hate coming my way for saying this, but it's the truth. This kind of mob justice is exactly the same thing that was going on with lynchings. And I know that's hard to hear, and I understand that it's harsh, but if you are a person that is looking at this and have already predetermined before hearing any evidence or even knowing who the police officer is, if you have already predetermined this guy's guilty, he should be punished. Especially if you're thinking this guy's guilty and he should lose his life because of this, then you are exactly the same as the white racist and white supremacist in the South that used to lynch black people. Because that was the same mentality that they had. They believed that because somebody did something, we don't need a court system. We don't need to prove whether or not they actually did it. We just need to go ahead and string them up. Well, that is not justice. And what they're calling for here is not justice. Now, if you want a process to take place, you want an investigation, that's already happening. And rest assured, especially if this becomes a high-profile thing, after the investigation takes place, there will probably be a court case following that if there's any evidence that the police officer acted in an incorrect way. And that's fine. That's the way the justice system is supposed to work. And so if that takes place, that will be justice. They're calling for justice, but justice has already started to take place. If they're thinking about punishing the guy before we find out, which seems to be the mentality coming from these people, then I'm sorry, you can't get past that. And they're saying no racist police. Again, for all we know, the police officer was a black guy. It's not likely because white people constitute about 70% of the American population, but that is entirely possible. And even if it is a white guy, that would not necessitate that race was the driving force behind this. There is absolutely no evidence whatsoever right now, that could change, there is no evidence whatsoever right now that even if the officer messed up, that it was racially motivated. And so that's really, the idea that you're referring to police officers as racist doesn't make any sense. They were also chanting for the mall to shut down and to shut down Highway 31. And again, like I said about shutting down the road, none of this ingratiates anybody to your cause. If you're causing problems in the mall and trying to shut down the mall and trying to shut down Highway 31, that doesn't help your cause. That just makes people that are trying to go out and get Christmas presents for their family members or their kids, that just ticks them off at you. That just makes them less likely to want to listen to you. And so it's a very ineffective strategy, if nothing else. And I don't understand, the mall didn't do anything wrong. The people driving on Highway 31 did nothing wrong. So the question is, why is this protest effective? How is this supposed to get the word out and get people more likely to agree with you? And the answer is it's not going to. It's an ineffective strategy. Because at least, and we're coming up with this anniversary just in I guess it'd be a couple weeks now. The anniversary of the Montgomery bus boycotts. At least that protest made sense because the buses were acting in a racist way, making some people sit on one part of the bus and other people sit on other parts of the bus. And you were punishing the bus company. You were punishing them. You weren't punishing innocent bystanders. You were going after the company that had committed the wrong. The mall didn't do anything wrong here. Highway 31, even though Highway 31 is not an organization, Highway 31 didn't do anything wrong here. And so you're punishing innocent bystanders. You're punishing people that had nothing to do with the situation that you're upset about. Why not use all of this energy to try to find the at-large shooter? Because if all these people, instead of wasting their time protesting and trying to make life difficult for people that had nothing to do with the situation, if they put that energy towards trying to find the shooter that's still at large, that we still don't know who it is, then maybe that would be more productive. Maybe then we could find this guy. And I still think that the reason that the videotape has not been released, and this is speculation on my part, I don't have anything to back this up, is because this is an ongoing investigation where we still have a gunman on the loose out there somewhere. And maybe part of the reason that they aren't showing the tape yet is because they're afraid that somehow showing the tape would tip the guy off that they're on to him, or scare him off somewhere, scare him underground. I don't know if that's the thinking. Maybe it is. You'd have to ask Ali about that when this is all said and done and come out in the wash. So I think that that's a possible cause for that. But the point is, we still have an at-large shooter roaming around somewhere in Birmingham, and everybody seems to really not care about that. But this is the problem. And it's just as wrong for people that are saying, absolutely, the police officer is in the right, he's the one that did the right thing, and the other guy was just a thug and a criminal. You don't know that either. We don't know the story. And this is the problem that you're running into. Strong emotions and a weak mind do not make a good combination. And right now, if you're one of the people that are angry and upset, and because of that, you're marching and protesting and trying to make life miserable for other people, but you don't have the information, you have strong emotions and a weak mind. And that leads people to very poor decisions, as is illustrated by the news of the day. All right, so another big story has come out recently. This is some international news, and this is one that really has a personal draw, at least on my part, because you know that I just recently came back from the Ivano-Frankivsk region of Ukraine. And the region that I was in, the people that I know, they're all in Western Ukraine, so luckily they haven't really been affected by this, at least in a direct way. But Ukraine, the other day, President Poroshenko, and I'm sure that my interpreters would just cringe at me trying to pronounce that, but nonetheless, their president, he declared martial law yesterday, and their ruling body approved it for 30 days in 10 different Ukrainian provinces. So 5 of them are the provinces that border Russia, another 2 border, and the other 5, are ones that are particularly vulnerable to Russian influence. And so martial law has been declared in each of these. As a general rule, I don't like the idea of martial law. I understand its necessity, but this means that the government there in those particular regions are going to be able to censor speech. They're going to be able to enact curfews. They're going to be able to have basically run of the place, and you have to do what the military says. So I understand its necessity in certain circumstances. I'm not really 100% sure if it was justified in this case, although I'm sure that the president and the governing body wouldn't want to enact it unless they felt like they absolutely had to. And there is a lot of pressure going on in the Ukraine right now. One of the things that I don't think I've mentioned on the air so far is that I actually met with, I believe his title was, he was the vice governor of the region that I was in Ivano-Frankivsk. And they actually showed us part of their museum, and this is not from way back. This is a museum of the conflict going on with Russia right now. And you can look and you can see the actual battles. You can see the soldiers. You can see how the soldiers are living. You can look at their equipment, their firearms, their ammo, some of the vehicles that they've been using. And so in America, because this isn't something that is making the news on our side very often, it's easy for us to forget that at least it may not be necessarily what you would call an open conflict, but there has been war going on, and over 10,000 lives have been lost since 2014 when Russia invaded the Ukraine and took control over Crimea. This is an ongoing conflict that has never been resolved. It's happening today. There are people fighting and dying today in Ukraine over this struggle. And it is a really, really tragic that is something that's going on. Like I said, it's not a full-on what we would call a hot war where the whole country is doing this, but this is something that they are dealing with. And when you look into the eyes of people that are afraid for their families and afraid that their homes are going to be taken over and Russia is going to try to annex them, I mean, it becomes very real to you when you actually meet those people and look at the people that have actually been out there on the front lines fighting Russia and fighting their aggression. And it is really tragic. This whole thing started, though, the reason that martial law was enacted is that 3 Ukrainian boats were attacked by the Russian Navy, which wound up injuring 6 Ukrainians. Now, Russia claims that they entered Russian waters, which is problematic on a number of levels, because primarily the waters that they're claiming that they entered are waters near Crimea, which is still part of the Ukraine. Russia claims it. They claim that they've conquered it, but Ukraine still has claim over Crimea. It's still their land, regardless of what Russia thinks or wants. And so they're saying that they entered into Russian waters. They entered their own waters. They were in Ukrainian water. And the fact that unprovoked, they just started attacking Ukrainian ships. And again, Russia has a bad habit and a long history of doing this, just kind of claiming, oh, we didn't know anything about it. You'll remember when they killed one of their agents there in Britain, which wound up, unfortunately, also affecting not only their target, but several people around him. They said, oh, well, we don't know how that poison got there. We have no idea how that gas got there. They're literally the only country in the world that could have produced that poison. And they did that intentionally, basically daring the world to call them out on it. Because it was well known that they were the ones that originally produced it. They're the ones that develop it, and they're the only ones that have the resources to create a toxin like that. They were sending a message to the world. And Russia has gotten ridiculously brash over the past several years. So really, this is something that unfortunately has been escalating. And ever since 2014, where they really got bold and started taking over Crimea, you have to keep in mind, too, that war between Ukraine and Russia and backed separatists has been going on since 2014. So this is not a new occurrence. This is something that's been going on for about 4 years now. And the United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in a statement that the seizure of Ukrainian ships was a dangerous escalation and a violation of international law, which is really refreshing to hear. I'm really glad that the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is taking a stand against this. Now, what actual measures are going to be taken against Russia, we're really not sure, because when it comes to sanctions, they're already pretty heavily sanctioned, and it doesn't seem to really be deterring them. And so presumably the next step would be, I guess, more sanctions, but I really don't want to get into a war with Russia. Ukraine's already in a war with Russia. But here's another little bit of history that really bothers me. Part of the reason that Russia was not going to attack the Ukraine for a long time is because Ukraine also had nukes. Yes, they had significantly less than Russia, but the point is they had nuclear weapons and were ready to defend themselves. And who was it that convinced Ukraine to get rid of their nukes? It was America. We were the ones that convinced them to get rid of it, and if Russia ever does anything, we've got your back. And then, of course, Russia did do something, and America basically just said, yeah, good luck with that. And so, you guys know that I love my country. I think it's the greatest country in the world, but we have made some really poor policy decisions when it comes to foreign relations, specifically ones that were made in the Obama administration to remove Ukraine's primary mode of defense. And we said, well, you get rid of them and then we'll take care of it if something happens. And of course, when that happened in 2014, Barack Obama was basically like, good luck, Ukraine. So this whole thing really just cooks my grits on this. The fact that a lot of the reason that they're having the problems that they are now is because of American foreign policy. And I hate to say that, but that is the truth. But Russia is a very serious threat. They're a threat to the Ukraine, they're a threat to Europe, and they're a threat to us. And we need to start taking that seriously. Even though I was not a big fan of Mitt Romney, he hit the nail on the head when in a presidential debate. He said the biggest geopolitical foe of the United States is Russia. And he was laughed at. People in the media laughed at him. President Obama said, hey, the 1980s called, they want their foreign policy back. That was a quote from Barack Obama. And yet, he was 100% right. History has shown that Mitt Romney actually hit the nail on the head. And it's hilarious to me that now the Democrats, because they're afraid of Russian collusion, and again, there's yet to be any proof on that, now all of a sudden Russia are the bad guys for the Democrats too. And sadly, there are actually some Republicans, and I use that term very broadly, I'm including the rhinos in that as well, that are now defending Russia and saying, no, we don't have to worry about Russia. We flipped sides on it. Democrats were always the ones that were cuddling up to Russia, and now the Democrats are the ones that are worried about Russia, and there's Republicans actually defending them. Look, Russia has been a bad actor for a really long time, and they continue to be a bad actor, and the sooner that we treat them as though they are a bad actor, the better off we will be in our foreign policy. Russia is a very serious threat. I would argue the largest threat that we have right now. The fact that they're backing the Iranian regime, I mean, other than China, and I still think Russia's probably a bigger threat than China, they are the number one threat to us on the global stage right now. And I'm glad that there are some Democrats that are finally waking up to it, but Republicans need to remember that you are not supposed to be backing Russia. And unfortunately, the Ukrainians have gotten a very serious reminder of that. Putin has publicly said that he wants to put the USSR together. Well, guess what step one of that plan would be? Taking over Ukraine. They were part of the USSR, they're Russia's closest neighbor. If he were to do that, the first step of that would be taking over the Ukraine. He's already taken over Crimea, which means that his plan is already in motion. And if we just let him do what he wants, if we just let him make all these bold moves with no retaliation whatsoever, then he's going to do it. He is going to try for it. You ever have a little brother, and that little brother would just poke you and poke you and poke you and poke you and poke you, and just see exactly how much he could pester you and see exactly where that line is before you would retaliate and turn around and smack him? That's what Russia's doing right now. They're doing these bold moves. They're doing these attacks, just seeing exactly how much the world's going to tolerate before it actually does something. And I got to say, I believe it's time for us to take some pretty drastic action. I'm not saying that I want to go ahead and start a war with Russia, but they need to know that we're serious about this. And as much as I detest that Donald Trump has used far too soft rhetoric when it comes to people like North Korea and Russia, you have to admit, policy-wise, he's been pretty hawkish. He's been pretty good policy-wise on going after Russia, much more so than the Obama administration was. So while I don't agree with everything that he did, and I certainly wish that he wouldn't be so complimentary to people like Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin, even though I have a real problem with the rhetoric, and you guys know I talk about that whenever he says something about it, at least policy-wise, he's doing a lot better than regimes of the past have done. So Ukraine is a sovereign nation. It has a right to defend its borders, just like the United States. And we need to be willing to stand with them in that. I'm not saying we defend their borders for them, but President Trump has also announced that he is planning to be able to sell more weapons to the Ukraine. He is going to increase the number of weapons sold to them. He's going to give it to them at a good price. We want to give them the resources that they need to fight for their own independence and their own liberty. And my thoughts and prayers go with them, not only for my friends in Western Ukraine, but for those in Eastern Ukraine that are fighting for their lives right now. By the way, exciting new stuff coming up, just so y'all know. And we're going to be putting together, so instead of the musical interludes, which, don't get me wrong, I quite enjoy, we're going to have some extra content for you actually playing during the breaks. We're going to have some short little comedy sketches, some of the things that we're putting together. I'm going to try to be doing that through the holiday season. So while I'm off, when I'm taking off for the holidays, we're probably going to get a lot of that work done, and we are working on that. So don't worry, that is coming. There's a couple of really good sketches that we have some ideas for. It's just a matter of getting the video together. Just purchase some video editing software, so that should be coming before too long. Now, getting back into the news of the day, tech companies have all of a sudden decided that they're going to go full 1984 on us, and it is some scary, scary stuff. that is coming around the bend here. First of all, Google has engaged in social engineering in China. For those of you who aren't aware, I've talked about it on my show, both on the radio and on here a couple of times. There's this project that they're working on and have been for a few years called Project Dragonfly. It was kept under the lid for a long, long time, but it finally got out into the public, and Google is working on this program that will essentially reward or punish people in China based on their social media behavior, and they're coupling with the Chinese government in Beijing to try to work all this out. So essentially, if the government sets the standards. So if I, for example, were to tweet out something that were derogatory towards the government or was causing problems or causing division according to them, that would be enough to dock what they call social credit. So if you dock your social credit, everybody has a rating. It's kind of like a credit score rating, almost more than it is an actual monetary system. You're not getting paid basically for this. You're getting access. And already there have been people that have been denied airfare. So in other words, you can't buy an airline ticket if you don't have a certain level of social credit. And if you do have that airfare, some people were kept from upgrading. In other words, you had to fly commercial class or economy class instead of business class. And so you couldn't upgrade your ticket to fly for a better price in a better place. And also, people have been denied rail access. So all of this is trying to nudge people. Actually, nudge is too gentle. This is definitely in the shove stage. They're trying to shove people into acting the way that they want them to act. And this is what's so terrifying, is that it is an American company, Google, that is helping the Chinese do this. And if they can do it there, they will already understand how to do it here, which terrifies me, because Google could engage in this social interaction, this social engineering, if they wanted to. And this makes 1984, frankly, look like child's play, because Orwell could have scarcely imagined a system where every single action you have, and not just every single action, really every thought that you have, if you post it on social media, is documented and can be used as a way to judge whether or not you're the kind of person that they want you to be. And they can engineer and condition you based on your behavior to think and act the way they want you to in order to get the stuff that you want, be that concert tickets or to just be able to go see your family for the weekend on a railway. And so really terrifying idea that it's an American company helping them with that. In fact, today that there were employees at Google that wrote a letter to corporate about the secret process or the secret project vowing to quit. There have already been people that quit that company, even though they were in very high paying jobs, specifically because they said, I'm not helping with this. I do not want to be a part of this. There was a guy, I think about a month and a half ago, that walked out specifically for this reason. And remember that Google is also working on China's search engine, which will only allow citizens in China to access the information the government wants you to. Can you not see how that would be pretty terrifying? Because put yourself in that position. Put yourself as an American in that position. Let's say the American government got to decide what information was correct and what information was incorrect. And believe me, there are people that want this to happen. There are people that have already voiced their approval of this to happen and to try to sort out quote unquote fake news and put forth legislation that would do that. Which again, who gets to decide what is true? Who gets to decide what is credible? My stance has long been, give people all the information, whether it's true or not, and let them decide. Are they going to make the wrong decision every now and then? Yeah, they are. But it's much better than having some bureaucrat who has an agenda try to sort out what information he does and does not want you to have. And the Chinese government is doing exactly that, and Google is assisting them in doing so. They're saying to the Chinese, you will have the information we want you to have. I mean, this is textbook social engineering. They're trying to engineer people to read and think a certain way. And they are doing so with the full help of Google and the resources that they are offering them. And this government censorship and social credit is based on what they call trustworthiness. So in other words, if you're a good little soldier, you're a good little cog in the machine that is our society, then you get rewarded and everybody else, you sit down. This is the problem that I have with this. Oh, you want to think about? No. You get back in line. I, the elite, living in my ivory tower, will make your decisions for you. You can have your own ideas. You can have free speech. I don't like that one. Get back in line. Get back in line. Get back in line. This is what they're going to be saying to you every single time they deny you something that you want. They're trying to shove you and incentivize thoughts that they do like and punish those that they don't. This is so far removed from the idea of free speech and free thought that there could be nothing further from it. They're trying to engineer a giant re-education camp that covers the entirety of the country. And by the way, they already do have re-education camps in China that they are sending people to that don't have the right ideas. I mean, this is a dystopian future. This is 1984. Actually, it's worse than 1984 because they have better technology than 1984 did. And the idea that you, as a government official, get to decide what direction society is going. You get to decide what people should think and what they should eat and what activities they should engage in. This is beyond reprehensible. And I do pray for the people of China. Keep in mind, this is a country where religious liberty is not tolerated. I was watching a video not too long ago of some Christians. I didn't personally help them. It was other Christians, other missionaries that engaged in this. I actually am engaged financially with a Chinese mission work program, but this is a different group. Anyway, they were able to smuggle in Bibles because you have to smuggle in Bibles. You can't get it in any other way. They smuggled in Bibles to these people that are written in Chinese and the language that they can read and understand. And man, it just breaks your heart because when they open up their Bibles, there are people literally crying because they finally get to hear the Word of God. They finally get to hear the ideas that Jesus Christ taught that they've been told about by other people for a long time. Now they finally get a Bible of their own. They get a Bible that they can look at and read and have a one-to-one connection with God. And it is just mind-blowing that there are people in this world, a large civilized country like China, that's illegal, that they have to hide that from their government. I really do pray for the people of China because it just, the way that their government is trying to stifle free speech and trying to stifle churches and other ideas that they don't agree with, I can't imagine what living like that it would be like. And it is why I am so incredibly grateful that I live in a country where it is enshrined in our Constitution that religious liberty is a human right. It is a human right everywhere. But the difference is our country recognizes it and at least takes steps to make sure that religious liberty is preserved and the government doesn't interfere. Unfortunately, the thinking in China is to do the exact opposite. Nonetheless, unfortunately, Google has also done some other creepy activities over the past couple days, notably that Google has patented a full home surveillance system. So it's already a little weird, and this is the reason that I would never have one in my house. They have the Google Assistant thing, so it's like a little monolith that you plug in and you sit it. It's connected to the internet. It's connected to your house. And so that was really the first stage. And the thing that bothers me about this is it's always listening. Because if it wasn't always listening, you wouldn't be able to say, okay, Google, and then it would automatically snap to attention. You either have to turn it on or you would have to go over and physically press a button to allow it. Otherwise, if it's just voice activated, then that means it is constantly listening. That doesn't necessarily mean it's recording, but according to this, their new system is going to. And not only is it going to record, it's going to record audio, it's going to record video, and this is a system that is in every room of the house. Since we've been talking a lot about 1984, you'll remember they had a viewing screen in 1984, but that was only in one part of the house. That was in your living room. If you wanted to go into the bedroom, you were outside of the view of that. Now, they still had audio. They could still basically tell where you were based on the video and audio feed from your living room. But the point is it was only in one part. And there were certain places in that one room that you could kind of hide. That wouldn't be the case if this Google product becomes commonplace. You would walk into your house, and whether you were in the kitchen, or whether you were in your living room, or whether you were in your kid's room, there would be cameras and audio sensors, microphones everywhere. And the stated purpose of this is to essentially gather metadata on how you live. So if I go home and I watch an episode of Gotham, it will pick up on this, and it'll say, oh, he likes comic books. Hey, Caleb, would you like tickets to the new Spider-Man movie coming out? Hey, Caleb, would you like to buy this Batman shirt? See, this is how they're going to do it, and they're going to be selling your information. They're going to be selling information on how you live your life to companies to allow them to advertise to you more effectively. Now, you guys know, I'm a big C capitalist. I love the free market. And generally speaking, I stick up for corporations when I think they do the right thing, and I don't think that them being big or them being rich is necessarily a bad thing in and of itself. But if Google engages in this, even if the free market is the one that pushes it, that is a terrifying idea. That people are just going to have this system, and it's going to be delivering your information to private companies that are paying for it. I mean, that is a horrifying idea. And so it won't just be the things you do. One of the examples it gave is if it sees a movie star on your t-shirt, it can say, hey, they have a new movie coming out. Would you like me to go ahead and buy the tickets? So, I mean, this is really engineering your life in a certain way. They're trying to map human behavior, and they're already doing it. They already started it with the search engine. That's how the search engine works, is that you make searches, you click on certain things, and they try to figure out based on that how humans think. They try to map human behavior. This is that just 10,000 times bigger and involved in every single aspect of your life. We're already doing it with our phones. We're already doing it with our search engine. But this is going to affect every single aspect of your life. And it is really a terrifying prospect to think about. Unfortunately, Google is not the only company that is engaged in this. You also have Twitter. So Twitter is banning certain people now just for stating basic facts about science. And the reason that I say that, the latest thing that they are going to ban, and this change took place in October, but it really just started gaining attention when they started implementing it, is that now it considers misgendering a form of abuse. So if there's a guy who is a guy and has all the guy parts and has a Y chromosome and all that other stuff, and you say, hey, you're a man, Twitter can ban you for that. It is part of their terms of service. This is a quote directly from the press release. Or no, this is actually from the terms of service. We prohibit targeting individuals with repeated slurs, tropes, or other content that intends to dehumanize, degrade, or reinforce negative or harmful stereotypes about a protected category. This includes targeted misgendering or dead naming of a transgender individual. So misgendering, just to define our terms, is when somebody says, I am this gender, and you say, no, you're not, you're the other gender. So if you're a 35-year-old guy with a full beard, and you say, hey, you're a dude, and he says, no, I'm a woman, then you are, by Twitter's definition, misgendering them. Same thing goes with the name. This is what they mean by dead naming. So we'll use Caitlyn Jenner just because she's famous. If I follow Caitlyn Jenner on Twitter, and I refer to her as Bruce Jenner, then that is dead naming, and that is enough to get me banned from Twitter. So just by stating basic scientific fact that men are men and women are women, and that we are different and have different body parts and different biology and different mental capacity, different mental functions, all of these things, that we have different emotional needs, any of that is enough to get you banned from Twitter. Which, if they actually implement it, means that there are going to be an awful lot of people banned from Twitter, myself included. So if Tactics Radio, at Tactics Radio, just goes off for a while, that's probably why. It's not that I did it, it's that somebody banned me. But anyway, so this is something that is really problematic. And I get that Twitter and Google, all the things that I've been talking about today, they're a private company. They have the right to engage in this as long as it's compliant with the law. But that doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it okay. If Twitter wants to be a place where free speech abounds, where people can just come on and speak their mind in an open forum, whether their ideas are good or bad, then as much as I may dislike some of the bad ideas, that's a good thing. People shouldn't be censored. And I'll stick up for anybody, left or right, that is being persecuted for these ideas. In fact, one of the first people that was banned under this new policy was someone that was not on the right. She's a feminist named Meghan Murphy, and she was banned for misgendering because she's a feminist. She believes that transgenderism is at odds with feminism. Probably somebody that I would agree with on virtually nothing when it comes to politics. And yet she and I are one and the same on this. And because of this, and because she believes that men are men and women are women, and you wearing a dress doesn't automatically make you a woman, or heck, not even wearing a dress, you saying that you're a woman doesn't make you a woman, because there is more to a woman than just saying you are one. Because of this, she was banned from Twitter. And despite this, because remember, what it was saying is people who dehumanize, degrade, or reinforce negative or harmful stereotypes about a protected category. Again, who gets to decide who is a protected category? That would be Twitter. I'm guessing white people aren't a protected category because you had Sarah Jong on the New York Times that was talking about how white people are really dogs. That's dehumanizing. And that their opinions don't matter, and she loves making white people cry. And yet she's still on Twitter. I don't think she should be banned. In fact, if she was banned, I would say she shouldn't be banned. But the point is, you're going to kick off people that say that men are men and women are women because you're saying that dehumanizes people. But you're not saying that for people that say so about white people, again, because they're not a protected class. Well, you just made up the protected class part. Let's also talk about dehumanizing. Let's talk about some of the things that a lot of Muslim activists have said about Jews. Look at Louis Farrakhan or Linda Sarsour. People that have called Jews termites, that say that people have been hypnotized by Israel. Louis Farrakhan, who has said, I mean, I could go down a list with him, satanic Jews, that they're the problem with this country, that referring to them as insects. And yet, he's still on Twitter. Nobody's banning him. How is that not dehumanizing? How is that not going after a protected class? Again, because he's somebody on the left, because he's very popular, they're not going to go after Farrakhan. So it's a double standard no matter which way you look at it. And Linda Sarsour has sort of parroted that and is not much better. Twitter also recently banned a woman named Laura Loomer, who was a conservative, for criticizing Representative Ilhan Omar. Now, what's funny about Ilhan Omar is she has said disparaging things about Jewish people, and she's still on Twitter. But this woman, who's a conservative writer who criticized her, they banned her because, well, they didn't actually explain why, but they said it was for criticizing her, who's a Muslim. So you can't even be critical of people you disagree with now if they're a member of that protected class. Conservative writer Jesse Kelly was banned on Sunday, and no reason has been issued. Presumably it was because of this misgendering thing, but they've not given an explanation. Yet she was banned for life just a couple days ago. Twitter has a very clear bend against conservatives and primarily against conservative ideas. They can say that they don't have a bias, that they're trying to be equal to everybody, but you notice that when push comes to shove, it's always conservatives that are the ones that get pushed out the door first. And it's impossible to say, well, let's just be civil to one another and have a conversation and elevate the communication when you believe the thing that is bringing the conversation down is conservative ideas. Is conservatives saying, no, if you have that body part, you're a man. If you don't, you're a woman. If you have this chromosome, you're a man. If you don't, you're a woman. That's not somebody that wants to have a conversation. That's somebody that wants to silence dissenting opinions. That's someone that says, you don't even get to have a say. You don't even get a seat at the table if you disagree with me. Look, there's plenty of people I disagree with, like Alex Jones, that I still don't think should be banned from Twitter, that I still don't think should be banned from social media, even as horrible as some of the things that they have suggested, like denying the Holocaust, which is abysmal by any stretch of the imagination. I want the racists to have a voice. I want the bad people to be able to speak out, because then we know who they are. Then they reveal themselves. Have faith in society. Have faith in the American people that when they see someone that's a legitimate racist, the vast majority of us are going to say, nope, don't want anything to do with him. Let the people decide. Just be a medium and let the people hear it themselves and make their own decisions. That's what I believe. That's what I believe, that this country was founded on, that idea. That you just let everybody have their say, and then when push comes to shove and everything comes out in the wash, that by and large, like Thomas Jefferson said, the American people will sometimes get it wrong, but eventually they will reach the right decision. All right, let's go ahead and go straight to the daily dose of stupid.
That was stupid.
I know it was stupid.
Really stupid.
Hey, I just said it was stupid.
Today's daily dose of stupid, boy, this is a good one. So apparently British students are racist. That's right, they're being accused of racism now because they do not want a Muslim refugee in their class. Now, you know that in England, a lot of refugees came over during the Syrian civil war. This particular one came in as a child refugee. He's 15 years old. His little brother is 12 years old. And a lot of the parents and a lot of the students are now complaining that these kids were allowed into their school. And the reason they are is because they're just evil, hateful, racist. Well, that's not the reason that they give. What they're saying is that the person isn't really a refugee, that he's abusing the system, and he should not have been allowed to come in as a child refugee, because they're claiming, and again, this is hard to sort out, because of, in Syria, there aren't exactly the same kind of record-keeping capabilities that we have in first world countries. And so you don't have a birth certificate, you don't have records on them. They're just claiming that they're 15 and 12, and they're saying, yeah, look at them, they might be a little bit older. So this is a picture of them. The one up there on your right, he is the one that is claiming to be 15, and his little brother there on the left in the jacket and tie, he's supposedly 12. These guys are clearly like in their upper 20s, at least 30. I mean, the guy on the right, he has a full beard. His beard is fuller than mine. I'm not kidding. Like, compare the two. Look at my beard, and then look at this guy. That guy has more facial hair than I do, and I'm 29. And the other guy down there, I mean, there's no way he's 12 years old. That is a full-grown man. And yet, because of this, because they're pointing out the obvious, that these guys lied to the people and somehow were allowed to come in as child refugees and are now entering a middle school. They're in middle school and high school, and they're complaining about this, and they're saying, well, you're just racist. They're obviously grown men. How do you not see this? I just don't understand. You know, it actually does remind me, we have footage of how these guys came into the country trying to get past Border Patrol, and once you see the video, it actually does make sense. So here's the video of these two actually trying to get through and get their child refugee status.
Gary, what's going on? Who's this?
I wanted you guys to have a little edge today, so I brought my friend Carlos. He is from the Dominican Republic, and he is one incredible ball player.
Carlos, that's great. How old are you?
I'm 12.
We're like 1,200.
Check my birth certificate.
He's legit.
You kidding? This is green crayon.
Papi, papi.
Silencio, mijo.
Okay, so this is pretty much exactly what we're dealing with here. And by the way, if we'll go back to the original graphic, look down in that bottom right-hand corner. This is a picture from that guy's social media, and it looks like, and maybe I'm just reading too much into this, it looks to me like, isn't that him having a beer? And so it's almost exactly the same thing as that clip from the Benchwarmers that we just showed. This guy is here. He's obviously a grown man with a full beard, has a beer, and in that clip, I love it, the tail end there, his kid comes out and asks for him, and he's like, no, run away. So, oh man, the world that we're living in. Again, people just will fling out the racist label for absolutely anything, any kind of criticism, no matter how legitimate, no matter how obvious, like it is in this case. It must be because you're racist and a bigot, and you hate brown people, you hate people that are not from your country. No, but I can acknowledge that that dude is clearly a grown man, and he should not be in an 8th grade math class. I think that's fair to say. And I don't know, maybe because what the left is doing now is, well, really, your gender is just fluid and gender is all in your head and that's a social construct, and so you can be a different gender if you want. Maybe what these guys are doing is they're taking a book out of that, the guy from Amsterdam. They're taking a page out of his book where he's saying, well, if you can pick your gender and gender is fluid and you can just imagine you are whatever gender you are and they have to change it legally, then I'm just going to cut 20 years off of my life. I'm going to be 60 instead of 80. In his case, it was 40 instead of 60. And so I guess that's what they're doing now, is that we identify as teenage boys, and therefore you have to take us in. I guess in the liberal logic world, that somehow kind of makes sense. But I mean, if you can identify your own gender, why can't you identify your own age? Why can't you identify your own species? If I want to identify as a 750-year-old koala bear that's female, I don't see how that makes any more or less sense than me just saying that I'm a woman. And so really, we are living in a world where there are no rules. It's like that Little Caesars commercial you remember from a few years back. It's just the guy takes off his shirt. There are no rules. I guess that's the way it works in liberal land. All right, let's go to the Chaplain's report.
In 1775, the Continental Congress created the Chaplain Corps. Under the command of General George Washington, each soldier was required to attend worship service every Sunday. While other armies advanced on their feet, Washington's troops advanced on their knees. It's time for the Chaplain's Report with Caleb Colquitt on tactics.
Chaplain's report this morning comes from the book of Isaiah. And one thing that you'll notice in Isaiah, and I'm going to set the stage here just a little bit. Isaiah is dealing with Israel, with their transgressions, with the fact that they have gone away from God. And he starts talking about those who have been faithful to him, that have been loyal to them, that even though they are going to suffer as a nation, that he is going to take care of those who have been loyal to him, who have done the right thing, and eventually he will restore Israel again. And this is in the latter part of Isaiah, and there's quite a bit of prophecy sort of woven into that, but we're going to focus on the here and now, at least for the reading of Isaiah today. And our reading comes from Isaiah chapter 61, verses 7 through 8. Instead of your shame, you will have a double portion. And instead of humiliation, they will shout for joy over their portion. Therefore, they will possess a double portion in their land. Everlasting joy will be theirs. For I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery in the burnt offering. And I will faithfully give them their recompense and make an everlasting covenant with them. One thing that you'll notice about God talking about the scriptures and talking about how he deals with people is that he almost always has conditional language attached to it. If you do this, then I will do this. For example, whoever believeth and is baptized shall be saved, whoever believeth not shall be condemned. That's conditional language. He did the same thing with his covenant on Mount Sinai. He said to Israel, if you will follow my precepts, if you will follow the law that Moses gives you, then I will bless you, and I will make you a great nation. And the people of Israel all agreed to do so. They didn't always follow that covenant, but the point is they agreed to do so initially. And so there is this idea that there is conditional language that is given. God is saying, I will do these wonderful things for you, and I will give it to you for free. You don't have to do anything for it. All I'm asking for is a little obedience. All I'm asking for is that you do the best that you can, not even necessarily always keep it perfectly, but that you do the best that you can to seek after me, to look for me, to follow the commandments that I have been given to you. And he rewards the people that do that. He's saying that when Israel turns back, when Israel does so, then their shame will be turned into a double portion, that these terrible things that they're enduring are going to be turned into great blessings. That eventually, if we follow God, if we actually do what he asks us to do, and we submit ourselves to our will, conforming ourselves to the image of his Son, then eventually we will be able to be blessed. It may not always be the blessing that we want in exactly that moment. It may not be exactly the blessing we were thinking of, but the point is, God is going to take care of us and give us a double portion. And any shame that we have, any guilt that we have, those things are going to be taken away. Instead of humiliation, we will be given to shouts of joy. It's not that erases our sin per se. God's the only one that can do that. But that our good deeds and our desire to follow Him, the joy that comes from that, of knowing that we're doing the right thing, that we're following God and we are fulfilling the intent that we were always created for, that is to love God and to serve Him and to do His commandments. And in turn, that also means that we will be helping others. There is no greater joy than this. There is no greater joy than living and walking with God. This is something that we've seen all throughout the biblical narrative, and Isaiah understood very well. That you can go through this life with a God-shaped hole in your heart, never being able to fill it with anything you try to throw into that vacuum. But once you found God, you've got everything. There's a great quote by C.S. Lewis, where he says, "The man that has God and has everything has no more than the man that has God and has nothing." And so we look at our lives and measure them so often by material blessings. God is saying, those things are great blessings, and for some of them, I will be able to restore that to you and give the portion. But everlasting joy, that's what He really promises. He really promises this idea that we're going to be able to walk with God, that we're going to be able to be in communion with Him, and there is no greater joy than that. And why does God give us these conditional promises? Because of who He is and because of His nature. He loves us and He wants what's best for us. But He's also not going to make sure that our life is free from the consequences of our actions. Which is why He says, "I, the Lord, love justice and hate robbery." God has a joy in His heart. He loves justice. He loves to do the right thing. He loves to reward those who have done right and punishing those who do wrong in hopes that they will become right again. In the same way that you may not want to spank your kids, you may not want to discipline people, you may not want to turn away from somebody, but sometimes that's exactly what people need. Sure, it's a last resort, and sure, you don't like doing it, but sometimes that makes them better people, and that really is the intended goal of justice when done correctly. And to those who understand that and obey His will, God ends this passage by saying, "And I will faithfully give them their recompense and make an everlasting covenant with them." An everlasting covenant with God is a great thing, because God does not lie. God is always consistent. And so when He makes a promise with us, you can rest assured that He will always, 100% of the time, keep that promise if we uphold our end of the bargain. That is what God promises us. He says, it is free for you. It is here for you. If you want it, you can obtain it. He just gives us a few conditions on that. But the grace that we receive is far greater than anything we could do to ever engage in a covenant with Him. And that's why God's love is so boundless. It has everything to give and essentially nothing to gain. It is endlessly merciful, endlessly gracious. And that's good, because that's exactly the kind of God that we need. Stay the course, friends.